Hi everyone, and welcome back to this week's Lit and Lang Gang podcast. This week we are focusing on Ozymandias by Percy by Shelley.
Yep.
And you are here with me, Miss Gough.
And Miss Graham.
Cracking conversation, analytical interpretation, and igniting imagination with the Lit and Lang Gang.
Okay, so Percy by Shelley is quite a character. I feel we say that about everyone.
Yeah.
Every single person, like, oh, Wordsworth was such a character. This guy really was, though. He was very outspoken.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Very extreme for the time period in which he lived. If you don't know Shelley, guys, you might have heard of his wife, Mary Shelley. Eventual wife, I guess we should call her, because they run away together when he's married to another woman. She's just 16 years old.
Yeah.
They run away to Switzerland together.
Yeah. We're involved with people like Lord Byron and things like that.
Who was described as mad, bad and dangerous to know.
Yeah.
Lord Byron was quite literally exiled from Britain because they didn't want him around anymore. They just sort of said, you're so awful, get out of the country.
Get out. Yeah. So he's fraternising with those kind of people.
Yeah. If you're ever interested in knowing a little bit more, because we won't go into it now because unfortunately it's not relevant to the poem.
No.
But if you want to know a little bit more about them and their relationship and what that group were like, there's a really good drunk history on it.
Yeah.
There's an episode on Byron and an episode on Shelley on YouTube.
Yeah.
I've not seen the full episode, unfortunately, but the clips on there are absolutely amazing. So, the basic potted, very bad history of them, drunk history, I think, will make you realise these poets weren't quite as boring as you first think.
No.
But you've got all these bits about him being very outspoken.
So he obviously lived in a period of time when the British government were quite fearful of revolution, and quite rightly so, because the French Revolution had just finished the decade before. So 1789 it started, ended in 1799. There's a lot of anarchy. It was known as the Reign of Terror. People were petrified, and people like Wordsworth originally supported it until they realised, whoa, this is getting a little bit too much.
Very violent.
Whereas Shelley was a supporter of it, and we could definitely William Blake was a supporter of the French Revolution. But yeah, British government feared any kind of revolution, and they took oppressive measures against radicalism in society. So Shelley was outspoken in the fact that he wrote a range of different poems. He wrote some political kind of pamphlets as well, that expressed his kind of hatred towards tyranny. And he wrote one called The Masks of Anarchy in response to a massacre that took place in 1818. He never treated poetry as an explicit political comment or moral argument. He didn't like it when poetry was didactic, which is interesting.
I didn't know that.
So he was getting his anger across, but he wasn't designing it as a kind of message to people. And he did comment, and he wrote Prometheus Unbound, and in there he said, "Nothing can be well expressed in prose that is not tedious and excessive in verse."
Quite critical of his own art then.
Yeah, but he certainly was active in looking at the political events, and obviously his life was taken quickly as he died in the boating accident.
He died at sea.
Yeah.
Mary Shelley, his wife, burned his body on a beach, which in the Victorian era, to burn a body wasn't commonplace.
I think she saved his heart as well.
Yeah, she kept his heart, didn't she? This is what I mean, guys. These writers, they certainly weren't dull.
Yeah.
But the thing is about Shelley, because obviously this is all important, his idea of kind of like fight the power, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is a poem all about power and having tyrannical rulers where you can't have your say, where you're unable to change it. But ultimately he's arguing, but, give it time and it will change. He actually never saw this statue. So if you don't know, Ozymandias was a genuine real ruler. He named himself Ozymandias. The real ruler was called Ramesses II. You can look him up on the internet. He's a real guy. He was rumoured to be incredibly cruel. He had hundreds of slaves. Do you know he had hundreds of children by 9 women as well?
Wow.
I think he had about 103 children, something like crazy. I was like, that's roughly 10 children a woman. Which freaked me out.
A lot of action.
God. Yeah, a lot of action and also a lot of childbirth for those poor women in ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
Like, they probably all died.
Yeah.
God, that sounds awful. And he gave himself the name Ozymandias, so it's not one that was given to him by the populace. Ozy means heir, and Mandius means to rule, mandate. So it's almost like he rules over everything. He rules the air they breathe. He rules life. And so when you think about the arrogance of a statement like that he gave himself, it kind of tells you a lot about him.
Yeah.
He had thousands of slaves under his command, and was rumoured and historically has been noted as one of the cruelest pharaohs of Egypt. Shelley never saw the statue. The statue as well, again, if you're interested, there was I think it was about 2015, 2016. The English department, this was before you were here, had a little bit of a freak out because they found a new part of the statue. And we were all like, oh my God, it's Ozymandias, they found a new part. Because it is a real statue that has broken apart, and the trunkless legs are still there. Percy himself never saw it. He went to the British Museum and was looking at statues about ancient Egypt, and was looking at these statues, and he actually met a curator at the museum who told him about Ramesses, which is where this also comes from as well.
I never knew that.
Yeah, the curator told him all about it, and then he wrote his poem. But you also said it was a competition to write a sonnet.
So the title, he had a friend called Horace Smith, and they basically had a competition with each other who could write a sonnet with that title. And obviously he was the successful one. But yeah, he liked that competitive nature with other people.
I wonder if they were together at the museum.
Could have been, definitely. Yeah.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So, lots of kids say to us that they like the short poems because there's less to analyse. I feel that's actually sometimes a bit terrifying because there is less to analyse. I feel when you look at something like My Last Duchess or Extract from the Prelude, there's a lot there. Something like Ozymandias, you're going to have to be quite perceptive.
Yes.
You're going to have to find those points, especially if you're aiming for 8s and 9s, you're going to have to be a little bit creative with it. Because looking at our notes, we don't have a hell of a lot written down in terms of language and structure.
No.
But we'll just start with the semantic field of decay. If you have a little look through, you'll see throughout the poem we've got this idea of something being broken and, as I say, decaying. So we've got antique, we've got shattered, we've got I might even
lifeless.
I put survive maybe in that. Wreck.
Remains, or nothing remains.
You look through and there's actually quite a lot of this idea of something that has died or is being destroyed, which is of course the statue, but also the man. Nature is the only thing that actually thrives and does not decay. And throughout as well, there's lots of alliteration. Now, I'll come back to the sibilant alliteration on line 4, or Miss Gough will, because I know she had comments on that. But if you look on line 5, you've got a wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command. That cold command there to really emphasise the way that Ozymandias was cruel and nasty. But of course, the irony is it's the statue that's presenting that. And actually the alliteration there is highlighting power. The statue has power. The statue would have been made by a slave. It would have been commissioned, I would imagine, by Ramesses. So they deliberately made him look awful, so history has remembered him as awful, and in many senses the slaves and the sculpture has had more power over time than Ozymandias or Ramesses has had. So there the statue has power. And then if you look into the penultimate line and the final line, so what is that, line 13 and 14, we have boundless and bare and lone and level. And what you notice there is the alliteration is describing nature, because at the end of the poem we realise that the true power is nature, and it has had that overall impact. What I've realised we've missed, of course, in the context is romanticism.
Oh yeah, of course.
Because Percy Shelley is a romantic poet. If you go back and listen to... Did we do this on the podcast yet? Yeah, Wordsworth.
We've done him,
Go back and listen to the Prelude podcast. We talk a bit about romanticism, which is the belief that God is the ultimate power in the universe. And by extension, God on earth is nature. So God and nature are the most powerful forces. And of course, when you look at something like this, well, God is the one that deems that we pass away, and you pass on in belief at the time Shelley's writing into an afterlife. And nature destroys everything that humans leave behind. So it is really representing those romantic views.
Inevitable fate of the fact that we're going, everything decays.
Yeah, everything goes. It's like the ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and we have boundless and bare, lone and level. Like you go back to the earth.
It's interesting.
He was a romantic poet. I think I did say that. He's a second generation romantic poet, which all that means is Shelley, Byron and Keats were all inspired by the previous poets before them. Now, the dates are very, very close. However, your first set of romantic poets, Wordsworth, Coleridge, there's always Blake.
Yeah.
Wordsworth, Coleridge and Blake were the original Romantic poets, and then Byron, Shelley and Keats were inspired by them.
Yeah.
So that just basically means he's inspired by someone like Wordsworth, and I don't think that necessarily comes through, but the ideas are the same. They're very similar.
Yeah.
Which is why when we get to the comparison bit, this goes so beautifully with Extract from the Prelude.
Yes.
It's a very good connection to make.
Definitely.
And he believes that God and nature are the most powerful forces.
Yeah.
I think it's quite interesting. He's killed by nature, he's killed at sea.
Yeah.
This is quite interesting.
Yeah, it's heavily ironic. And you was mentioning the sibilant part in line 4 as well. So half sunk, shattered visage lies, whose frown. I think it's kind of like, for me, because it is quite powerful, it almost resembles wind, like the wind as it's attacking the statue.
Because that's what would have destroyed it.
Yeah.
This is Egypt. It's going to just be those sandstorms.
Yeah. So I think that bit there, it's like whistling, almost when you read it, and it contrasts the idea that he had a cold command, like that is now
harsh consonants.
It's harsh consonants. That was something he used. It's an echo of his power back then. But that's, if we look at the connotations of cold, it's dead. It's lifeless. It means nothing anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is interesting.
Do you know the thing I always love is that first line though? I met a traveller from an antique land. I love that this is a poem all about power and who's got it.
Yeah.
And of course we know contextually Shelley's never seen the statue.
No.
But our narrator has never either. It's like it's already a story within a story. It's already a framed narrative.
Yeah.
That I met a traveller from an antique land who said.
Yeah.
So Ozymandias' power is so far removed that we don't even go and see his broken statue. We just hear about his broken statue, and that shows how powerless he is. I think it's a really nice idea that we're kind of thrown into a framed narrative.
And I will talk a little bit about the kind of structure of that in a moment as well.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. No, you're fine. What else have we got?
Personal pronouns.
Yes.
I'm on line 10.
Yeah.
My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty in despair. Definitely symbolic of the power that Ozymandias, the man, believed he had. Those possessive pronouns of my name, my works. Well, his name isn't Ozymandias, it's a name you've given yourself, but you believe it to embody everything you are. You have power over all life. Maybe not so much, Ozzy. And my works. I mean, irony, there's nothing there. It's loner level. Like, he's look on my works. And we're like, well, where are they, Ozymandias? I don't see them.
Yeah. And the irony is that's not even the real line, is it?
No, and it's if you are interested in the statue, it's not even what it says. No,
it doesn't.
That's paraphrased from the statue. So we don't even hear Ozymandias' own voice.
Yeah, we don't.
You'd expect that to be, here's Ozymandias' power. Here's this inscription on the statue. That's not even the inscription, guys. No. That is Shelley just kind of mocking that even further. Like, oh yeah, that's kind of what it says.
Yeah.
Really interesting, that paraphrasing there. I really like that. I think that's pretty much it for language, isn't it? So,
yeah.
I mean, there are other things you can talk about. You can talk about obviously that the final line is all about how nature is more powerful than anything else. They stretch far away. There is no work. I think the short sentence of nothing beside remains, because the rest of this is, I mean, we haven't written it down actually, but it's full of enjambment and caesura. But that nothing beside remains. And it's like, that's isolated, that's on its own, and it's so final. You know, look at my works, you mighty in despair, and that's Shelley's nothing beside remains. It's like you're looking around like, where are your works then to show that he was completely powerless?
Yeah. Interesting.
But structurally,
it
is a sonnet,
yes,
if you hadn't realised, guys, so have a little count up, 14 lines.
Yep.
But it's a rebel sonnet.
It's unconventional.
Yeah, it's unconventional. Rebel sonnet just means it doesn't match all of the set rules you have to have.
It's quite, with sonnets, it's very set, very rule heavy, and you get writers like Shelley breaking away from it, rule breakers.
He was a rule breaker.
To show that idea of revolution, perhaps, as well. Yeah. Even though he doesn't like using it as didactic kind of messages, there is revolution there.
There is revolution in the style, and he was constantly trying to fight the power, so... Yeah. And fighting the power of Ozymandias by therefore breaking with conventions.
Yeah.
I think that could be symbolic of that.
It could, yeah, definitely. And I was looking at the poem, it's quite tight, like a tiny little box. And I always think it's like a microcosm of society. So because there's so much irony throughout the poem, what I mean by microcosm is this idea that it's a community or a place or a situation regarded as encapsulating a miniature version of characteristics of something much larger. Okay? I feel like that was a big old waffle.
I'll make it word of the week, it's fine.
Yeah. So essentially what he's doing is he's creating this little microcosm. He's using the pharaoh and kind of the ideas behind it to really pick apart that idea of tyranny in society.
Essentially, a microcosm, it is a small embodiment
of
something much bigger.
So is this an embodiment of society at the time? Tyrannical rulers thinking that they have all the power, when actually, through the use of irony, he's saying, actually, it's inevitable, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
So framing it like this, it's kind of like Shelley's having
It's
one up.
rebellion.
A bit of a rebellion,
A microcosm of rebellion.
Ooh.
Imagine putting that in an essay.
Yeah, you've come up with some good phrases.
I come up with them on the podcast. I can't do them when I'm teaching. I'm just like, oh, I should have written that down. God damn it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we've got that microcosm, and it's a sonnet. I also think it's important to note that there is a volta after line 8 and going into the second part of the poem. Now, it is a volta. You would get the mark for that to say it's a volta. However, with sonnets, there are also specific conventions. You have what is called the octet and the sestet, or the octave and the sestet. It means the same thing, guys. So the first 8 lines, oct, tend to be about an idea, something that the poet wants to kind of build you up with. If we think of an example of Shakespeare's My Mistress's Eyes Are Nothing Like the Sun, the octet is all about how hideous she is and how awful and ugly and she stinks, and that's like the lead-in. When you get to the sestet, that's often what the poem is truly about. So you get to that deeper meaning. So again, with My Mistress's Eyes, we have hideous, ugly in the octet, and then the sestet is like, but I love her despite all these things, and actually that makes my love greater.
Yeah.
So it's about true love.
Yeah.
Here, the octet is all about the statue. So if you read it, it's a description of the statue. We have a little bit about the history of Ramesses II, and essentially what it looks like. When we move into the sestet, then, that's about the true meaning of power. So yes, we have on the pedestal, but that's not the pedestal, so that's not what's written there. So that's not really part of the statue at all. That is Shelley telling us that power doesn't last. And then we go into talk about nature, and nature is everywhere. So those second 6 lines are the true meaning, and I've got to be honest, I think there's more to quote from that section.
Yeah, definitely.
Not to say ignore the octet or the octave, but I think there's always going to be more from the sestet in this case.
Yeah.
It's also in an irregular rhyme.
Yeah. And I've put down internal rhymes as well, because if you look at some of them, you've got like stand, sand, hand, trunkless, sunk. I know it's not full there, but there's kind of some internal rhymes, which again fits in with this kind of unconventional idea. It's almost like, because you've got that rhyme scheme throughout, the wind attacking the statue gradually.
I always think rhyme works as a driving force. So when you've got rhyme, the poem flows and goes a bit faster. And I think that could be symbolic of the destruction nature has. I mean, think about it. Ozymandias, we could do research. I don't know how old Ramesses II was when he died, but they didn't really live much beyond their 30s, 40s in those days, did they?
They didn't.
The idea that, life is short, life is quick. Shelley's in his 50s. I don't want to say.
I don't know. Shelley was young.
Oh, God, look at the pictures of him. He does look quite cruel, doesn't he?
He does. He was born in 1304 BC and died in 1214 BC. So, I don't...
That would sound like he had a very
long life.
Long life, but surely
no,
not.
Shelley himself was quite young when he died.
Yeah, I didn't think he was particularly old.
He died in... He was born in 1792 and he died in 1822, so...
Oh, gosh, hang on, he was way younger. Was it 1792?
Yeah.
Was he 30?
Yeah, he was 30.
Oh, my God. I thought he was older than that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really tragic. Mary Shelley goes on for a little bit longer on
She
her own, doesn't
does,
she?
yeah.
But all their kids die as well.
Oh, no.
All of them die. It's horrible.
Pretty tragic.
It's a horrible, tragic story, though. They have quite a few kids and they all die. That's not relevant. More relevant, if you study Frankenstein, that's relevant.
That is relevant.
Because there's death of children in Frankenstein, which is actually where life ends up imitating art, because she writes about this and her kids kept dying and there's children dying in the novel. So, so it's really tragic if you ever study Frankenstein. Wider context. We're rushing a little bit because I'm looking at time like, oh my God. But yeah, so structurally you've got the sonnet, you've got the being the microcosm, the octet and the sestet, and that irregular rhyme. And do look at the end of lines like line 1, land, line 3, sand, line 6, 5, command. So, depending on the accent, that would work. At the end, we've got despair, bear, decay, away. So you can see there is a bit of rhyme. It's just what we would call irregular, inconsistent.
Yeah.
Again, he's breaking with that convention. He's breaking the rules of a sonnet because he himself is a bit of a rebel. He's a rule breaker.
Yeah.
In terms of the themes and the comparisons then, I think it's all about power, is it not?
Yeah.
Power of humans.
Yeah.
So, either humans being powerful or not being powerful, you can make that connection. Very good links. London.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the key link there. They're very similar.
Yeah.
My Last Duchess.
Mm-hmm.
And the power and the control of the narrator.
And the ignorance and the arrogance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And though everyone hates it, tissue.
Tissue's a really good
I
one.
think the idea of humans being insubstantial, insignificant in comparison, fragile. I think that is in both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Then the power of nature. Miss Gough looks at me whenever I say this. I'm always like, power of nature, it's got to be prelude. I'm always like, Ozymandias and prelude, they're a pair for nature. They go together. It's about nature over time. And this is about time destroying the statue. And the irony is that Wordsworth is about how time will destroy him and that mountain will live on.
Yeah.
So you get that idea of nature will outlive all of us and our works and we will be insignificant.
Yeah.
I think that's...
And in terms of context, it does fit nicely because they're both romantic poets. However, if you wanted to kind of expand out a little bit, and this is where context for your paper too is a little bit more broad, because they consider social kind of aspects as well. So how things over time have changed. So if you wanted to, exposure, looking at a difference there, is a different situation.
Exposure to the elements.
Exposure to the elements is there.
Sibilant alliteration echoing the wind.
Yeah. Yeah, you could connect via that, and then Storm on the Island, because they feel threatened. They feel we are prepared, aren't they, at the beginning? But it's the idea that
bombarded by the empty air.
And remember, we spoke about that political message behind it as well. Although this isn't necessarily a political message, there's tyranny in both.
Yeah, I guess it's how well you argue it.
Yeah, it's again
and how confident
introductions.
You feel. If you aren't confident,
it will
go
come
with
through.
prelude.
Yeah.
If you are confident and you feel you could argue something like Storm on the Island, but you would have to frame it in your introduction.
Yeah.
Did you want to mention that one?
Yeah, I will do.
I'm going to let you do it.
Because of the tyrannical rulers, I would even... This is one of the ones where you might hinge on it. Checking out my history. Because there's an anger in his poetry we see with John Agard, and this one... I mean, it's a lot more subtle, but he's definitely rebellious in what he's saying. So, yeah, it could be something to consider.
Just be confident with that one. I couldn't do it personally,
No.
but Miss Gough might be able to, and some of you in there might want to give it a go. And if you do, as always, please pop in to see us in UC7 and UD4. We'll always go over it. And if you even have a go at questions, ask your English teacher. I don't think we ever have a problem with looking over papers that you've had a go at in your own time. Or just have a sit-down chat with one of us. We won't have time to, unfortunately, mark it for you, but have a sit-down chat with us, see if that works.
Yeah.
And we'll happily give you any feedback. Very quick one, short poem. I actually feel like in that time we've found some really interesting stuff that we didn't even prep for.
No.
Nice.
Yeah, I like it.
Super. Thanks again for listening, guys. We'll see you next week.
Bye.